Hello and welcome to the ID Talk podcast. I'm Alex Perala, flying solo today. Tony is away, but I'm very happy to be joined by Alex Kech from GLEIF. That's GLEIF, which you can see in the show notes for this episode. We're going to have a very interesting conversation about identity assurance for organizations, which is kind of an unusual topic, but definitely of interest to our ID tech ecosystem. So I'm really looking forward to learning more about how GLEIF approaches this issue. But Alex, welcome to the show. Thank you for coming on.
Well, thank you for having me.
So I guess we should start things off because our listeners, many probably aren't familiar with GLEIF since we focus more on like authenticating individuals, that kind of technology. So maybe let's just start with a high level explanation of what GLEIF is. What does GLEIF stand for, and what does it do?
Sure. So GLEIF stands for Global Legal Entity Identifier Foundation. It's a non-for-profit Swiss foundation that was created 10 years ago by the regulators, actually. So the financial and capital market regulators, following the 2008 crisis and the debacle of Lehman Brothers. The use case, if you wish, was when Lehman Brothers collapsed, it was not one legal entity, but hundreds of legal entities that went down overnight. Some did, some didn't. And it was very complicated for regulators as well as banks, for example, to have a clear view of the exposure they had on these entities because they were not properly identified and identifiable across countries and across borders. Companies are incorporated at national level in a business registry, for example, but they don't have a passport. And really, what the LEI was created for is to create a passport system for legal entities to present themselves and in a verifiable way and demonstrate their existence, not only cross-border, but also potentially domestically. Like you can use your passport to also prove that you are 18 to buy alcohol, for example. You don't have necessarily to use your national identity card for that.
Right. I'm actually surprised to learn that something like that didn't exist before, it sounds like. So there was nothing like UN affiliated or whatever that could register financial entities or just any entity, I guess.
Very strangely, no. They are commercial offering, so companies who are identifying legal entities and sell their products. The difference here is that the LEI has been built to be a public good that can be used across the world by any users without restrictions on the use of the data that is publicly published on the GLEIF website, and also the consumption of the data and even repackaging of the data further down the chain.
Okay. And it sounds like it started focused on financial entities, but it's not just restricted to the financial sector at this point, is it?
Correct. So the initial use case was around OTC derivative reporting, so even more limited, but it extended to the entire capital market. And now it's being used for cross-border payments, identification of companies involved in cross-border payments to facilitate payer and payee verification, so AML, CFT, but also avoiding fraud that happens a lot, unfortunately. It's also used by and supported by the International Chamber of Commerce, which is an organization looking at trade, supply chain management to identify entities alongside very long supply chain management activities. It's also using ESG reporting. In general, it's used to either onboard a company as a client or as a supplier or as a partner and ensure that that company effectively exists, even if it sits on the other side of the world, and you can prove that. It's also used to identify counterparties or entities in transactions to facilitate everything around AML, CFT, and other type of screening that you need to do when transacting with other companies.
Okay, I have many more questions about that, but I'm curious first how you got to be involved in GLEIF and like what's your background? How did you end up leading this organization?
So my background is in banking and standardization in particular. So I started my career at a Bank of New York, which is a global custodian, at least that part of the business, in supporting global transactions. And for global transactions to take place in the capital market, but also in payments, you rely on ISO standards. So the ISO 20022 standards, which is a messaging standards to communicate data across country codes is an ISO standard, currency code is an ISO standard. So all those standards are built a little bit like containers are useful in global trade to have a standards way of transporting goods. Well, you have standards to have a standard way of transporting data, and that's what those banks are using. So many of those standards are built by a company called Swift. So you probably know Swift, the payment rail. It's not only a payment rail, it's also a standardizer. They're in charge of many standards. And I spent 18 years of my life at Swift building those standards, maintaining those standards. One of the standards we were promoting at the time was the LEI when it was created 10 years ago. So I was kind of in the industry, I would say, of LEI for quite a few years, but as a promoter of the standard, not as an active participant in the system. And following my Swift career, about 7 years ago, I jumped into the blockchain industry, co-founded my first and my only actually startup company specialized in crypto custody. And then actually being when you are standards, when you like standard, you are standard geek forever. So I also implemented standard in that industry, leveraging the LEI for identification of counterparties involved in blockchain transactions. Then moved to the 6th digital exchange in Switzerland. That's when I moved from Singapore to Switzerland, and I ended up now at GLEIF to support the next 5 years of the strategy.
Yeah, that's interesting, the blockchain thing, because when I was reading about GLEIF, I couldn't help but think of blockchain technology. I don't think I ever saw that word used in what I was reading from GLEIF itself, but I do see parallels there.
Clearly, and that's one of the reasons why I joined GLEIF, is because they built, and that's probably something we will be discussing a lot about in the next minutes, the verifiable legal entity identifier. So that's a organizational identity and verifiable credential system inspired by the DID and VC and verifiable credential systems that have been emerging with blockchains or on blockchains. So to exactly solve the problem of organizational identity and how these companies can verifiably prove their existence on digital platform, be it blockchain or not, but also people acting or system acting on behalf of the companies, those legal entities, can verifiably prove they effectively authorized to act on behalf of the company. And that's the old VLEI system. It's not built on blockchain purposely, and we can go into the details, because if you build it on one blockchain, the other blockchain will not use it. It's built as an overlay service in the cloud that can be integrated into a Web2 infrastructure, internet infrastructure, a Web3 infrastructure, or any infrastructure platform in a platform agnostic way, which is quite important as a protocol rather than a platform play.
Okay, cool. So at the risk of getting like a little too in the weeds, but what kind of adoption do you see when you mentioned that it can be kind of adopted on a Web 2 layer or a Web 3 layer? Is it like mostly Web 2 or like what's the divide there? I'm just curious because the crypto space has been so weird. I say crypto, Web 3, I should say. It's been such an odd space for the last few years. I think because of its ties to swings in the financial markets, but the underlying technology, there are so many really like vocal proponents of that approach to decentralized like ledgers and identity. So I'm just curious what the adoption is like on that side of it.
So it's the VLEI system. So the LEI system is 10 years old. The VLEI system is only about a year and a half old. So the root of trust has been established by GLEIF about a year and a half ago. And we are currently in deployment phase. So we have a network of what we called VLEI issuers, who are entities who are authorized by us to issue credentials to companies, who then can use that credential system to issue their own credentials, revoke their own credentials to their own staff. That is in deployment as we speak. So we are mostly at proof of concept and pilot level up to now. And in 2025, we expect live implementation of the VLEI in both worlds. So you were asking Web 2, Web 3. The first use cases that we see in the traditional world of digital, I'm going to share two of them, is telco communications verification and securing. So that's what of the US qualified VLEI issuer we have is focusing on is how do you secure SMS communication and any telecommunication really by cryptographically binding source of information like a telephone number and the brand behind that phone number to avoid all the you have to renew your Netflix SMS that we all receive every 3 times a day in my case. That of course aims at having your credit card details and then steal your money. So the fraud prevention in telco. The other use case we see in the Web 2 world is regulatory reporting. So it's leveraging the VLEI by regulators. So it's one specific regulator in Europe that piloted the use of VLEI for authentication of banks into its reporting system. So the VLEI of the bank at entity level proves that it's bank A connecting and not bank B connecting. So authentication mechanism. Permissioning, so accessing the system, and digital signature. So VLEI credentials are issued to the right person at the bank who is allowed to report to the regulator, and the regulator can verify that individual that is submitting the report and has signed the report is authorized by the bank to submit that report. So that's the use case on Web 2. On the Web 3 side, we're in discussions with integrators of blockchains like Chainlink, Layer 0, and other companies who are enabling chain-to-chain portability of things, be it digital assets or be it, in this case, identity, to integrate it for various purposes, create a concept of verifiable smart contracts, because smart contracts today are not verified, meaning that you don't know who is the issuer behind a smart contract. So if it's a token, for example, you could be buying a token that is not really the right token, for example. So verify the issuer verification through VLEI. Also wallet verification to ensure that a wallet has been KYC'd, has gone through an onboarding process and is legitimate to receive, for example, a specific stable coin or a specific digital bond, for example. And it can also be used to, when there is a requirement for blockchain nodes owners to be verified, because a specific financial institutions wants to use blockchain and only wants transactions validated by regulated entities, that can be verifiably proved that that entity is behind the node is a regulated entity.
Okay, that's all interesting. But we should probably zoom out just because a lot of this is unfamiliar. So just to kind of recap, VLEI is virtual legal entity identifier.
Verifiable legal entity identifier.
Okay. But it is sort of the digital version or digital first version of this LEI concept that has been pioneered over the last 10 years.
Correct. So it's the digital version of the LEI, and it's built on a decentralized identity and verifiable credential protocol to ensure that it can be managed in a decentralized way, can be scalable, and is not platform specific. It's more a protocol that can be implemented on platforms.
Okay, got it. And the LEI, I guess we can say conventional LEI at this point, what has adoption been like of that over the last decade? How extensive is GLEIF's reach with this?
So LEIs are issued in all countries of the world except North Korea, for the obvious reason that in that country there is no way to verify that an entity effectively exists.
Hmm.
There is no, well, they might be authoritative source of information, but we don't have access to it. But everywhere else, LEIs are issued. The total of LEI population today is around 2.8 million. It might seem small for compared to the number of legal entities out there, but it represents about 80% of global trade in value. So now we're looking at addressing the 20%, meaning SMEs, for example, and other smaller companies that might not have an LEI today and should have an LEI to help them in their trust quests when they do trade, not cross-border, for example.
Mm-hmm. I just have to like double click on this North Korea thing because that's the only country where
Yes.
that's amazing. I
Yes.
mean,
So there
how
are,
bad does it have to be?
yeah. So we rely on a network. So GLEIF does not issue LEIs. So we are publishing all the LEIs that are issued. We rely on a decentralized network of 38 LEI issuers, who are companies. Generally, they could be data providers like Bloomberg or the London Stock Exchange. They can be also infrastructures like securities, financial market infrastructure like stock exchanges. They can be also central banks. They can be just service providers who have been created to issue LEIs. And they are accredited per jurisdiction to issue LEIs for companies in that jurisdiction based on their capacity and verified capacity to demonstrate the existence of the company. So we don't issue LEIs to companies that don't exist, and that's the strength and the trust layer of the system that we cannot break. So we can do that in every country. There are sources, authoritative source of information for verification of legal entity in every country with an access to it that can be used to verify the existence of the company. It can be digital, it can be even paper document, but at least they exist. In North Korea, it's a bit more complicated as it's very closed as a country, and that's the reason why no LEI issuer has been accredited to issue LEIs in that country yet. Might happen in the future.
That's so interesting to me. Has there been an attempt to reach out to potential authorities in North Korea, or is it like they're just completely walled off?
Well, we, as I mentioned, the fact that we have LEIs issued everywhere means that GLEIF is neutral by definition and apolitical, and that's very important for what we're doing as our mission. So we have we overseen, by the way, by a regulatory oversight committee of 70 regulators that are from all over the world, 50 countries. So it is kind of the UN of identification for entities. The challenge with North Korea is that it's so closed, even politically, that we wouldn't know even who to contact to talk to be able to do that, and they would likely be a lot of complications to do that. So I'm not even sure we even tried in the past, and so I don't see how it would be possible.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Bit of a cul-de-sac for us, but I'm just so intrigued by that one case. But just going back to the issuer, you said there are 38 issuers, you said, including, I was kind of surprised to hear Bloomberg, but it makes
That's one
sense.
of
I
the
mean,
biggest.
they can vouch for a range of companies. So then the issuers issue the actual VLEIs.
LEIs.
LEIs, okay.
Yeah.
And
So
then
it's a different system. I can explain.
GLEIF is overseeing all of this in sort of like a neutral position.
Correct. So we accredit LEI issuers and we connect to them of course, to collect that information that they are collecting themselves in the various jurisdiction, and we publish that information. We don't create LEIs, by the way, randomly. So the legal entity itself has to request an LEI because it's a self-sovereign identity system. So they are responsible of their LEI and responsible of the reference data that is associated with the LEI. That's important to mention.
Okay. And then within an individual organization, do they like designate certain individual people who that LEI applies to, or how does that work at that
So
level?
the LEI is at entity level only. So one legal entity, one identifier. To request an LEI, the individual with in charge of managing the LEI for the company needs to have a delegation of authority from a director that we can verify exists, etc., etc. That's for the LEI. We can discuss maybe later about how it applies into the digital world and how it goes an extra step actually in the digital with the digital version of the LEI. But in the let's say an analog version of LEI, this is how it works.
Okay. Let's go into it. I want to know about the digital going a step further.
Exactly. So the VLEI system is also built, well, relying on a network of what we call qualified VLEI issuers, which are a bit like LEI issuers, but who needs to have a certain technical capabilities to support the protocol that we use to issuing those digital identities and verifiable credential. So their job is to, of course, verify that for example, legal corporate A coming to them asking for their VLEI is not another corporate. So to make sure that they issue that initial credential to the right company, that's one. And they will also verify that the individuals within the company who will be managing the VLEI system for that company are effectively working for that company, because it's based on a multi-sig approach where you don't want one person to be in charge of an entity credential, right? It needs to be multiple. And then they also verify the existence of and the identity of the what we called official organizational roles people, so CEOs, CFOs, the authorized signatories, in other words. A bit like in the real world, when a company has authorized signatories, they go to a business registry or a notary to record those authorized signatories and ensure that there is a way of recourse if something goes wrong. You can go to a third party to check whether that person had the right to sign on behalf of the company. So that we've applied that in the digital world by having that QVI, qualified VLEI issuer, also do that job of verification of authorized signatories and issuing credential to that authorized signatory for them to use later completely autonomously for signing contracts, for connecting to a system, or accessing a building potentially as well, because those credentials can be used for many things. So that's the VLEI package that the entity will receive, its ability to manage its own entity credential, but it's the credentials for the authorized signatories, but also the ability to start issuing and revoking their credentials for any purpose they want, completely autonomously. So they can start issuing credentials to all their staff if they want. They could use that credential system to as a single sign-on for their staff into their system, as an access credential to go to the building, as a way to delegate authority for specific staff who's allowed to, I don't know, make payments over $100,000, for example. So you can really structure your credentials the way you want and completely autonomously and revoke those credentials. This to conclude, this is the only system that does that in the world. There is no other verifiable credential system that enables that cryptographic link between an individual acting on behalf of the company and the company. It's generally it's either or. It's either a digital certificate or a verified credential is assigned to an individual, and it enables to prove that this individual exists or have some rights, or to a company, but never the two together. And that's what makes the VLEI very, very unique. And quite important for the future of organizational identity and the people and verifiable credential for the people acting on behalf of the company.
Yeah, there's obvious value to that approach. But to get to the kind of nuts and bolts of it, what does that credential look like if I'm the CFO at a company? How do I get it? Like, is it a code that I am going to write down? I'm assuming not. It's probably a bit more.
So it's a public-private key type of credentials that you would store into a wallet and that you will present to a system or to a verifying system that will be able to verify that the credential is valid, expired if there's an expiry date, or revoked, which is quite important as well. if you compare it to digital certificates, for example, that you can use for emails, etc., these things are not revocable by a company. If I'm leaving GLEIF tomorrow, I can still use my email digital certificates or my DocuSign digital certificate, despite the fact that I'm not supposed to sign anymore on behalf of this as a CEO of GLEIF, right? With that VLEI credential, if I would try to use it again to digitally sign a document or to access a system, the verification would immediately kick me out because my credential would be revoked.
Okay. And is there like a mobile app or something that is associated with it? Is there something like that coming, or how do you approach like actually getting it into people's hands?
So as it is an organizational identity system, it's more an enterprise type of approach currently. So we have cloud wallets to secure those credentials that not us are providing, but software providers are enabling. So you have wallets that are either physical wallets, meaning like type of card, or app wallets or cloud wallets that would be used for credential hosting. That's one. And then we have also software, people providing software for digital signatures. So to be able to digitally sign, a bit like a DocuSign, but with that approach. And we're also engaging with those mainstream software providers today for them to support those credentials in the future. And then you would have also verification software that can be used by a company to verify that the credentials they're being presented with are valid credentials.
Okay, so it's sort of I guess like platform agnostic when it comes to whatever other
Yes,
credentials a company might be using. It can be configured to work with those. It sounds
correct. So obviously, those companies would need to support the type of credentials we have, but it's a question of standard support and then software built at the end of the day. Yeah.
okay. Um, I don't see an obvious way that AI would be a serious threat to this system, but we have been talking about AI a lot lately on this podcast. So I am curious, like, do you see any threats from AI-driven fraud to this kind of approach? And if so,
Actually,
how are you addressing them?
yeah, I think it's more about opportunities than threats, to be honest. I'll start with the few threats that could exist. So during the verification process of the individuals who would receive a VLEI, you could imagine an impersonation like we do see with deepfakes, et cetera, et cetera. But the verification process and the governance behind the verification process is so strict that it's unlikely to happen. And if it would happen, the revocation process, that the ability to revoke credential at the moment that it is identified as a problem, enables the unplugging of the activity of the person trying to impersonate someone. So yes, I mean, there is never any system that is 100% secure, but this one is probably one of the most secure on the planet for two reasons. First, it's using multi-signature for every access to the system. It has a protocol that is also quantum proof in the sense that it enables key rotations, that if in the future, if your keys are compromised, you can rotate them and therefore keep your credential while having another private key to secure it. And that private key could increase in length if need be, with the challenges of encryptions that might occur after when we have a quantum computer. So it has been really built with security in mind. So that's one. The second is the governance framework, as I mentioned, for ensuring identification of both companies and individuals. And it's so strict. It follows NIST standards, level 2, to ensure that there are no risk about AI. If I may, I would like to go back to the opportunities.
Yeah, please.
One of the major use case for AI, unfortunately, for the bad people, is deepfake, impersonation, invoice fraud. So trying to mimic a real thing into something else to impersonate, to steal money, or to replace information, whatever. we believe that the VLEI system can be used to verifiably prove the authenticity of documents, the authenticity of even our discussions that we have here, like the telco verification I was mentioning a bit earlier. It can also enable entities who deploy AI agents, for example, to prove that that AI agents is linked to that legal entity through a credential system. Right. So we are already looking at how the VLEI can enable the security and the verifiability of AI agents, but also for individuals using AI agents to know that they are talking to the right agents and that it's not being, and that the data or information that they're receiving is properly authenticated and comes from a real source of information. It's not that easy because obviously technologically there are different ways of and approaches to do that, but it's clearly something that we're looking at.
I'm really glad to hear that. I follow the AI space very closely, and it's so much further ahead than the average person realizes. And I personally fantasize about having an AI agent that can deal with all my emails because I just have so many emails. So yeah, it's great that you're already thinking about how those agents could be verified as well as part of this whole
Absolutely.
ecosystem. I think that's a great approach. Yeah, this is a very interesting platform, and I'm really glad that we had this conversation because, I mean, I understood GLEIF when I was writing about it, because we were covering your news, but this has really wrapped my head around how the whole ecosystem works. So thank you very much for coming on the podcast and talking to us about it. And I imagine probably a lot of our listeners will want to get in touch with GLEIF to learn more and maybe how they can get involved. So if you have any uh, instructions for people who want to get in touch, please let them know.
Well, I would say the first step is to check whether your company, if you work for a company, has an LEI. And if they don't have an LEI, well, they can go on gleif.org and then in the search function, they will be able to verify their company name and find themselves if it's there. If they don't have an LEI, I would advise them to go for an LEI because it's efficient, it's cost effective, and it's really it really helps present yourself in a trustworthy way when you are, as a company, as a startup, for example, as you try to engage to do business with other companies, especially cross-border. The second is that if they're interested in the VLEI as a system, they can contact one of the QVIs, qualified VLEI issuers that we have, who are working on day-to-day on use cases and various use cases. And they can, of course, always send an email to, well, contact us via our website. There's I'm sure, an info.gleif.org website email where we can see how we can help. I would suggest that they look at the website itself, which has a lot of information, sometimes too much.
All right. Well, once again, thank you, Alex. This was great, very enlightening, and it was really great talking with you.
Well, thank you, and hope to see you another time.
I hope so.